All right, now we'll talk about long gun positioning of the firearm in the shoulder in relation to the stance. So I'll get both firearms loaded up here. So I'm going to load, ready, press check, and holster up both firearms. When we load up our firearm, when we get everything set up, if you're relatively new to long gun shooting, there's a couple of things to think about in relation to the sling that you're running and the buttstock itself. So just quickly, what I'll talk about is when we have a grip onto the firearm like so, get a good solid grip on the pistol grip. The buttstock length is very personal choice. Some people like it a little bit longer, some people like it a little bit shorter. Generally speaking, however, if your buttstock is touching your bicep and your elbow is at a 90 degrees, this is pretty good in terms of buttstock sizing. In terms of how much slack or tension, if you're running a 2-point sling versus a 1-point sling, for a 2-point sling, the slack and tension point that I'm thinking about is I'll put as much slack or tension into the gun when the gun runs straight up and down on my body. I want the trigger guard to be somewhere around my belt buckle. And the reason for that is this gives me opportunity and some slack for the firearm to move around my body. So if we're moving around tight spaces and we're fighting with this gun, we have some slack or tension, depending on how you want to look at it, to manipulate the firearm. Similarly, if we're presenting the gun to an off-shoulder position, we'll have enough slack in the sling that we can move around the gun without the sling becoming a hindrance or a nuisance. So generally speaking, for me personally, this is the way I line it up. So the gun rests straight up and down the body. If the trigger guard is somewhere around that belt buckle, you're good to go. And when we load up the gun, we're going to grab onto the magazine, ensure that it's fully seated into the magazine, give it a little pull, and I'm going to shoulder the gun. As we shoulder the gun, grab onto the charging handle, pull it straight back, cant the gun slightly, and then safe the gun. So press check is done, load is done, the firearm is on safe, we're ready to go. What's a little bit different with managing the recoil on a long gun and a pistol does come with the stance and the position of the balance. I don't want to change the footing too much. I want that to be replicatable, whether I'm scrapping with somebody, whether I'm shooting a pistol, shotgun, long gun, all the same. What is a little bit different, however, is the amount of input we put into the lead leg. So we do want to lean into the lead leg just a little bit more than we would with pistol, simply because we want to manage the recoil of the firearm as it's shot. So we're leaning into the lead leg just a little bit. We're going to bring the firearm into basically the valley, basically where the front delt is in the pec. There's a little valley there of muscle. That's what we want to find for the buttstock. All right, so I've seen and I've heard people, using the chest. Look, I'm not here to castigate on anybody's teaching material, but from my experience, if this is a position that we can find the firearm, we can move the gun into the what I refer to as the fight ready position, we can fight with it. So this is more than just a ballistic response. This is what I'm after. I want a position on the gun with the shoulder that is replicatable. People say, well, yeah, this is replicatable. I disagree. If we're going to move the gun to fight and scrap somebody with it and then try to find the center of the chest and then try to find our sights, we're losing a lot of precious time. So this is just my take on it. Take it or leave it. Firearm is in that shoulder, in the valley of the shoulder where the front delt and the pec muscle meet. We're going to lean into the gun a little bit. As we're readying the gun, so with a ambidextrous safety selector, if we're bringing the gun up to our eye alignment and we hit the safety selector with our thumb, we now have the ability to start prepping the trigger as we find the sight. So similar to pistol, target, trigger on the gun. The last thing we'll see before we release the shot is the sights. It'll be sometimes clear, it'll be sometimes blurry, sometimes you may not see it at all. But if the orientation, the position of the body, so body firearm position in relation to what we want to shoot, is relatively stable and in balance, you're going to have some success. Right? So I'm going to fire a couple rounds here from the fight ready position. Fight ready position. So I used to call this the broke down position because the firearm is broken down underneath of the bicep and ribs. Some services call this the high ready position. Just for terminology, I call this fight ready because we're ready to scrap with it. We're ready to either shoot ballistically or we're ready to beat the shit out of somebody. We're ready to do something with this gun. So I call it the fight ready position. So on the buzzer, 2 rounds, fight ready position. Now lean into it just a little bit, manipulate the safety selector, release 2 shots, follow through, trigger finger is then extended And then the knuckle, the main knuckle of that trigger finger, we're going to use the friction to safe the gun. And then now we can relax the position and get ready for the next application. So what you may have noticed there, or maybe not, I'll do it again and explain it. As we present the gun, manipulating the safety selector, I'm leaning into the lead leg just a little bit, just a little bit. I don't want to necessarily topple over and have the rear foot come off of the ground, but we're leaning into it just a little bit. And I'm really going to feel the glute and the hamstring engage on that lead leg. All right. So once again, 2 rounds on the buzzer. Now, a couple other things to think about in terms of the inputs that we put onto the firearm. In some cases, what you may have heard, or it's referred to as shoulder roll. So shoulder roll is essentially myself putting pressure, as the user, putting pressure onto the buttstock with the master hand shoulder. Too much shoulder roll, and we can cause the gun to move in a manner that we don't necessarily want to. Not enough shoulder roll, and we may have a difficult time managing the recoil. So we want the right amount of pressure from the rear, but also we want good amount of pressure with the support hand. Not necessarily over gripping the gun so much that we're influencing the muzzle left and right of the target, but enough of an influence, enough of a grip with the lead hand, so when we do lean into the gun and we release that shot, we're managing how much that muzzle is going to drift off the point of aim of impact. All right, so shoulder roll with the master hand, good solid grip with the master hand, pulling the gun into the shoulder as we lean into the shoulder itself. The support hand, one thing it's worth mentioning, the support hand position for me personally, I like to have my thumb, my support hand thumb, pointed at the target. And this is replicatable whether I got a long gun in my hand or a pistol in my hand. So picture this shelf has been created where my support hand thumb is pointed at the target. Well, both thumbs are pointed at the target, but that is replicatable when I have a long gun in my hand. So that support hand would run along the fore end of the gun, and this also gives me the ability to manipulate all of the switches and everything that's on this gun. Yes, we can manipulate these switches with our support hand in an offhand shoulder shooting position, but let's be honest, the majority of the time we have the gun in our master hand, so most of what I manipulate is with the support hand thumb, all right, for all the switches and lights and all that good stuff. All right, so support hand thumb points at the target. This is the fight ready position, looking just over top of the gun, looking for something to mess with. Something gets our attention. You're going to present the gun, find the shoulder, pull it in, lean into that lead leg a little bit. You're going to open up the hips. All right, so that belt buckle analogy, open up the hips a little bit. We're square to that target. Release the 2 shots. Follow through. Did it hit? If it did, great. If it didn't, hit it again. Extend the trigger finger. Safe the gun.